Good morning everybody. Today we'll see about a very important and interesting topic related to implant dentistry, which is osseointegration. Implants, we know, are now the treatment of choice for replacing missing teeth. For the success of these implants, osseointegration is seen to act as a very important factor. And this osseointegration to take place, several factors are needed. So we will see osseointegration in terms of historical review, and then we will see as to how this concept of osseointegration developed. We will see about the definitions, the scope of this osseointegration in dentistry, what fibrointegration is, what osseointegration is, what is the difference between both, okay? And then we will see about the ultrastructure of osseointegration, the biology behind osseointegration, the mechanism of osseointegration, the various key factors which are responsible for successful osseointegration. Okay, we'll also see how to evaluate osseointegration clinically. We have invasive methods, we have non-invasive methods. We'll see about the failure of osseointegration, and then what are the things necessary to maintain these implants so that this osseointegration lasts longer and the prognosis of implants is better. And then we'll have a short summary and the various lists of references I've used for discussing about this topic. So first let us see about the historical review. Okay. So osseointegration, before going into osseointegration, we must know a short history about the implants, because without implants, osseointegration has no role. So the earliest recorded implant specimen is from 600 AD from the Mayan civilization in South America. And then new form implants came into place, which are made up of emerald, which was found in the Peruvian mummies dating back to Inca period. And even Chinese and Egyptians have been using these implants, where they have been using ivory teeth. Okay. Ivory teeth were found to be embedded in the ancient Chinese remains as well as Egyptian jaw. Then when we come to etrusions who are now living in modern Italy replaced missing teeth with artificial teeth, which were carved from the bones of oxen. Okay. And then ancient Greeks had transplanted teeth from humans who were their slaves into their own sockets. Then it was in 1700 that John Hunter introduced the term transplantation, and he found that transplantation is known to cause numerous transmission of diseases. And then later, from the period of 1800, dentists had started placing implants made up of various different materials. Okay, made up of implants made of gold, made of lead, made of ceramics, and so many other materials they have been using. So the first documented evidence of implant placement was done in the year 1809 by Macchiello. The implants which he placed was made of gold. But however, placement of titanium implants, which are now the most widely used implant materials, was first done in the year 1965 by the author Brainmark. So it is this author Brainmark who introduced the term osseointegration. Okay. So Dr. Per Ingeborg Brainmark was an orthopedic surgeon who was working as a professor in the University of Gothenburg, Sweden, and he used threaded implants made up of pure titanium. Okay. And so it was in the year 1952 that Brainmark had been doing vital microscopic studies in his lab. Okay. So he wanted to study the blood flow in the rabbit, so he started placing titanium chambers into the femur of the rabbit and did his studies. And once all the studies was over, he tried to retrieve the titanium chambers from the bone. But when he was doing so, he wasn't able to retrieve. It was only the bone which was fracturing, but the titanium chambers could not be easily removed. So it was at this point that he coined the term osseointegration and found those titanium chambers to have osseointegrated so well into the bone. Okay. So he wanted to do an extensive study on this osseointegration. So he started doing studies in the animals first. He repaired major mandibular and tibial defects using integrated titanium fixtures. Okay. So he did a clinical study on it, and he did it as a two-stage procedure. First he used to place titanium implants, he used to wait for 3-4 months, and then after that he used to do a study at the macroscopic level, histological level and radiological level, and found that osseointegration had taken place so well in these animals. So this extensive study was done by him from 1952 to 1965. So it was a 13 to 15 year period of extensive study, and after this study was over and after he was so convinced that osseointegration does take place, in the year 1965 he first clinically placed implants in humans. Okay? So it was an edentulous human patient with a resolved edentulous ridge. In this patient he placed implants, and successfully the implants had been osseointegrated. So in 1977, Brainmark and his associates had given a structurally oriented definition for this osseointegration, which is defined as the direct structural and functional connection between the order living bone and the surface of the load carrying implants. And more recently, the definition which we are universally following is that of the GPT-9, which says osseointegration as the apparent direct attachment or connection of the osseous tissue to an inert alloplastic material without any intervening fibrous connective tissue. So thus we can see that osseointegration acts as a key factor for the success of implants. So the scope of osseointegration in dentistry is in all fields where implants are being placed. Yes. So implants are usually placed in the prosthetic rehabilitation of missing teeth. Okay. So a completely edentulous maxillary or a mandibular rehabilitation where the patient has to go either for a fixed prosthesis or a removed prosthesis, or when you have to replace partially missing teeth, okay, which can either be multiple missing teeth or it can be a single tooth replacement. Okay. Also maxillofacial prosthesis, which can either be an auricular prosthesis or an ocular prosthesis, okay, or a nasal prosthesis, or rehabilitation of congenital and developmental defect in the form of cleft palate or ectodermal dysplasia, okay, or any kinds of complex maxillofacial defect rehabilitation where we have to place implants for the retention purpose, or kind of distraction osteogenesis where a new bone formation has to be done, or some kind of orthodontic anchorage, okay, where we have to place certain mini implants. So in all such fields where implants are being placed, osseointegration is needed. So in the year 1970s, a new concept came into existence, which was fibrointegration, okay, which was given by Lynn Coe in the year 1970 and was again supported by James and Weiss. So in fibrointegration, there is always a connective tissue which intervenes between the titanium and the bone. Okay? And the AAID in 1986 defined this fibrointegration as a tissue to implant contact with interposition of healthy, dense, collagenous tissue between the implant and bone. And the other definition is, which is for osseointegration, is direct bone to implant interface without any intervening layer of fibrous tissue. Okay? So in the year 1970s, both there were two different concepts by two different groups of people. Okay? So few were supporting fibrointegration and few were in support of osseointegration. Okay? So this fibro-osseous integration later was found to be ineffective in bringing about this osseointegration, because they found that always a histological difference exists between the Sharpey's fibers of the natural teeth and the collagenous fibers which are present around the implant. Okay, and ultimately it was found that fibro-osseous integration can result in failure of osseointegration of implants because of the inability to carry adequate loads and chances of infection, which are always there in case of fibrointegration. So whenever implants are being placed in the patient, we should always expect an osseointegration to take place without any intervening connective tissue in between. So in this slide you can see that the first figure represents fibro-osseous integration and the second figure represents osseointegration. So in the first figure you can see that between the implant and the bone there is a collagen tissue which is being formed. Okay? So which is not what we want. What we want is an osseointegration, which you can see in the second figure, where a dense bone has been formed around the implant and between the implant threads. Yes. So in the next slide we can see about the ultrastructure of osseointegration, which is usually expected after the placement of implants. And here you can see that in the first figure, it's going to represent your soft tissue interface, okay, or in other words, the biological seal which is formed in the implants after it has been osseointegrated. And below that biological seal, you can see that it's an osseointegration which has taken place with the help of cortical bone and interspersed spongy bone in between. Okay. So the basic biology behind osseointegration, as suggested by Brainmark, is that in the first diagram you can see that initially when you are placing an implant, between the implant threads, okay, it's a wound which is formed, so there is coagulum which is formed between the threads. This coagulum gets replaced by the oven bone, okay, which later gets replaced by the lamellar bone, and then it changes its structure by the formation of cortical bone. Okay. But in case if this process doesn't take place, what happens is, instead of bone formation, collagenous tissue forms. So when this forms, it's called a fibroosseous integration, or you can also call failure of osseointegration, which we don't want. What we want is a healthy bone to form between the implant and the bone which is previously present. So immediately after placement of implants, okay, into the osseous structure, you can see that there is a race for this surface of the implants by numerous factors like ions, polysaccharides, immunoglobulins, proteins, fibroblasts, chondroblasts and osteoblasts. So when any of these sometimes is deficient in the patient, okay, because of certain immune deficiency or because of certain osteoporotic conditions, the osseointegration can also be inhibited in such cases. So nowadays, in recent times, we can see that there are implants which are being impregnated with all these particles. So basically, when we see about the stages of osseointegration, it is going to take place in 3 stages. In the first stage, it is going to be formation of an oven bone. Second stage is the adaptation of bone mass to load, where the oven bone, which is of lesser mass, gets converted into lamellar bone, which is of more denser mass. In the third stage, there is adaptation of bone structure to load, where the cortical bone formation will take place towards the bone and cancellous bone formation will take place in the coagulum region. And it is in that coagulum region where the cancellous bone forms and later osseointegration begins. Okay. So here in this structure you can see that this the difference between the oven bone and the lamellar bone. Oven bone is kind of disorganized, but whereas the lamellar bone is more dense and more organized. So this is a histological figure which is going to tell us about the biology of osseointegration. So in the first figure you can see that initially it is a oven bone or a disorganized bone which is being formed around the implants. The black region represents implants. So surrounding that implants, you can see that in the first figure it is an oven bone, and in the second figure you can see that it is more of a lamellar bone, and in the third figure you can see that this bone has again changed itself in structure and has become more organized, and it's more of a cortical bone. So in the third figure you can see it's a occlusal view where an entire implant is being surrounded by a dense cortical bone, and that is what is representing a successful osseointegration. So if you see the mechanism behind this osseointegration as to how this bone formation is occurring stage by stage, it is going to occur in 3 phases. You have an inflammatory phase which is going to take place for the first 10 days, okay, during which there is absorption of proteins, there is platelet aggregation activation, there is clotting cascade activation, cytokine release is there, non-specific cellular inflammatory response, specific cellular inflammatory response, and macrophage mediated inflammation. All these takes place. And then comes a proliferative phase which is between 3rd day to 42nd day, where proliferation or neovascularization, all these take place. So there is formation of new cells and there is production of immature connective tissue matrix. Then comes the maturation phase following the proliferative phase. So this maturation phase is going to begin after 28 days, where all remodeling of the immature bone matrix takes place with coupled resorption as well as deposition, and this bone remodeling keeps occurring in response to the implant loading. Based on how the implant is loaded, this remodeling can be either more of resorption or more of deposition. Then there is a physiological bone recession also taking place side by side. So here this is a diagram which is telling you about the mechanism of osseointegration which is taking place. So initially you can see that it is a blood clot which fills the space where the implant is going to be placed or implants have been placed. Later this blood clot gets replaced by the granulation tissue by means of mesenchymal progenitor cells, osteoblasts, macrophages and organ bone. Later in the third figure you can see that almost a complete osseointegration has taken place because of the activation of osteoblasts and osteoclasts. So now let us see the key factors which are responsible for this successful osseointegration. So there are 6 important factors which are necessary and in bringing about the successful osseointegration. The first thing, it is implant material biocompatibility. The material being used as implant should be biocompatible. Secondly, also the design has to be feasible for osseointegration. Thirdly, the surface should be such that the various factors which have a race towards the implants are coming and getting impregnated there very easily. Also, fourth factor is state of implantation or host bed. Okay, the bed where you are placing the implant. So the condition of that will also affect your osseointegration. And then the surgical considerations, the surgical precautions and considerations you are taking while placing implants. And lastly, the loading conditions, how much load that implant is taking up. So all these will determine the success of osseointegration. So first is, as I told you, it is the implant material biocompatibility. Okay, numerous materials are into market. Initially Maggiello used gold implants, which we saw in the previous slides, and then came lead and so many other materials into markets. Okay, so metals, ceramics and coated implants are there. In the metals you can see that either you can go for a commercially pure titanium, okay, which is the most biocompatible material and has excellent long-term clinical function. Then you have titanium alloys, which is titanium, aluminum and vanadium combination. You also have tantalum and niobium. Okay, so this again has a high degree of osseointegration and the exaggerated macrophage reaction is there compared to the commercially pure titanium. So apart from these metals, which mostly we go for titanium or titanium alloys, we have ceramics. Ceramic implants in the form of calcium phosphate hydroxyapatite, aluminum oxide and tricalcium phosphate coat. Okay. Or sometimes to the titanium implants, these ceramic materials are coated. You also have hydroxyapatite coated implants. Okay. So next comes the implant design characteristics. The design also plays a very important role. Okay. Design is nothing but a three-dimensional structure in the form of form, shape, configuration, geometry, surface, macro structures and macro irregularities. Okay, so initially it was a cylindrical implants which were used, then there is screw shaped implants. Now what we are using is we are using more of threaded implants. Okay, so threaded implants are found to have a maximum success. Okay, because only when the implant has a precision fit inside a vital bone you will have osseointegration. Okay, so cylindrical implants which are otherwise called press fit implants were initially found to have severe bone resorption and there was also lack of bone steady state resulting in micro movements. So nowadays we don't prefer cylindrical implants. Instead we are going for the threaded implants, where in the threaded implants itself there is alteration in the design, size and pitch of the threads which influences the long-term osseointegration. Okay, so in the figure you can see different types of threads. You have standard V threads, you have square threads, you have buttress threads. Of a square thread is found to be more effective because of the more functional area which is there to receive more amount of stress. Okay, also the small micro movements of implants which is used to be seen in the cylindrical implants can be avoided in case of these threaded implants. So now let us see about the third factor which is going to affect our osseointegration, which is implant surface characteristic. Okay. So the surface topography has a very important influence in the initiation of osseointegration. Okay. because the orientation of irregularities and the degree of surface roughness can influence to a great extent the osseointegration. So in the figures you can see there are two figures. In the first figure the surface of the implant is very smooth, and but whereas in the second figure you can see that there are certain rough irregularities present on the implants, and naturally the osteoblasts which are surrounding the implants is more in such implants. Okay. So how can you bring about this surface irregularity in the implants? There are so many different types of treatments. You can broadly classify them into three categories. First is additive surface treatment, where you do titanium plasma spraying or a hydroxyapatite coating, or you can go for a subtractive surface treatment, where you do either acid etching or you go for blasting with titanium oxide or aluminum oxide. The third thing is certain other modifications in the form of oxidized surface treatment or laser treatment or ion implantation. Okay. So now let us see about the different processes which is going to result in this different surface topographies. Okay. So either you go for a machining surface, okay, which is kind of subtractive treatment. So all these processes will come under either additive or subtractive or certain kind of modifications. So either you can go for machining of the surface, or you can go for acid etching using hydrochloric acid or hydrogen sulfuric acid. You can go for blasting using titanium oxide or aluminum oxide, or it can be a combination of blasting as well as acid etching, which is what most of the companies today are doing. It's an SLA surface. Okay. You also have hydroxyapatite coated surface implants. There is titanium plasma sprayed surfaces. You have oxidized surfaces implant, doped surface implants, and then you have nano size hydroxyapatite coating of the implant surfaces. So what are the advantages of such modification of the surface? There is going to be a faster osseointegration because of the retention of the fibrin core for a longer time, which is going to act as an osteoconductive scaffold. Okay. Also bone accumulations is more in such implants. Okay. So there is a contact osteogenesis taking place. The surface area is increased, so more of osteoblastic proliferation takes place. Cell attachment, growth and differentiation is also much better. Okay. So the risk of peri-implantitis and ionic leakage or corrosion is all decreased in such modified implants. So now let us see about also the bone factor. Okay. The bone factor also plays a very important role. Okay. So the first initial implant stability or the primary implant stability which has to take place once you place the implants immediately, that is going to depend both on bone quality as well as bone quantity. Okay. So the bone which has a well formed cortex and densely trabeculated medullary space is going to have a better osseointegration. Also quantity wise, in terms of length, width and depth, it has to be adequate. Okay. So both bone quality and quantity has to be adequate for osseointegration to take. Yeah. So if you see Lecombe and Zapp classification for the bone quality, he has classified it into class 1, class 2, class 3 and class 4. Class 1 is almost a compact homogeneous bone, homogeneous compact bone, but whereas in class 2 it is a compact bone surrounding a trabecular core, but whereas in class 3 the cortical bone is very thin. Okay, the trabecular bone is more, but whereas in class 4 the cortical bone surrounds the trabecular core, but that trabeculum is also very loose and spongy. Yes. So the osseointegration is known to take place well in class 1 and class 2. Yes. So next comes the misclassification. He has given another type of classification as D1, D2, D3 and D4. So again based on how much amount of compact bone is present. So from the figures you can see that D1 and D2 have more of compact bone. So osseointegration is also known to take place best in D1 and D2, okay, when compared to D3 and D4. Okay. So then the other factor which is going to play a very important role is the implantation bed or the host bed. Okay. So the bed where you are going to place the implant should have good cellularity, should have good vascularity. Also in terms of patient, if you see patient's age, systemic considerations, history of previous radiation, periodontal infection, history of smoking, any ridge resorptive conditions present in him, or certain osteoporotic lesions present in him can affect the osseointegration. So all this proper history has to be taken in the patient before deciding the patient for implant placement. So age as such, if you see, old age is not a very big contraindication. Old age also can, people also can have good osseointegration, but however extreme young age is a relative contraindication for placement of implants because of the incomplete alveolar growth which is there in such patients. Okay, so but however in certain selected cases, like ectodermal dysplasia, or when you want to place bone anchored hearing aids in young individuals, so in such cases you can go for placement even in the young age. Next is smoking. So people who smoke naturally have a lower success rate of osseointegration because of the vasoconstriction, reduced bone density, and impaired cellular function which is there in such people. Okay, so many studies have found that the mean failure rate in smokers is around 2 times than that of the non-smokers. Next is radiation therapy. Again, that is also a relative contraindication, though not an absolute contraindication, because the success rate is found to be 10 to 15% lower when compared to the non-radiated patients. So in such patients, it's always advisable to go for a hyperbaric oxygen therapy, okay, which will aid in bone cell metabolism and bone turnover. So followed by which you can take up the patient for implants. Then the other systemic factors like osteoporosis and hypothyroidism, this also should be taken care of, and we should advise the patients to take treatment for these hypothyroidism and osteoporosis, and then you can take up the case for implant placement. Okay. So next is the next important factor for healthy osseointegration to take place is the surgical considerations. How well you're doing the surgery to place the implant. Okay. So our main objective during placement of implants should be minimal tissue violence. Okay. The surgical technique should be a controlled surgical technique with surgical skill and technical excellence being very good. Okay. And another important parameter is profuse irrigation. Profuse irrigation for continuous and adequate cooling, and you will have to use well sharpened drills, and it has to be in grades. Okay. You have to use well sharpened drills, and you have to use it as graded series. Yes, so the drill speed has to be slow, and the proper drill geometry has to be there. The drilling should not be too much continuous, it has to be intermittent, and Ericsson has always suggested a drill speed to be less than 2000 rpm, and tapping should be done only at 15 rpm, and adequate cooling has to be done. This irrigant should already be cooled. Okay, so cooling with the irrigants, this irrigant should also be cooled. Okay, so any violence during the surgical procedure, okay, any violent procedures can result in overheating, which will naturally result in increasing the temperature of the bone. As a result, you can have necrosis, fibrous tissue formation, leading to failure of osseointegration. Yes. So next is insertion torque. Okay, always a moderate torque has to be used, because any high insertion torque can always result in poorer osseointegration because of the increased stress and compression which is taking place in the bone. Then the last factor which is going to affect our osseointegration is implant loading. Yes, so according to Brainmark, his main objective was that there should not be any loading while healing for a successful osseointegration to take place, because as I told you, Brainmark always suggested a two-stage procedure for implant placement. You first place the implants, allow it to heal, during which you don't give any loading at all. Then after it has completely healed, after the osseointegration is taken place, only then you start doing the loading. And here in the figures you can see that in the first figure, any premature loading, okay, premature loading before osseointegration is complete can result in movement of the implants and formation of soft tissue interface between the bone and the implant. Okay, but whereas no movements or no loading can result in a good bony interface and good osseointegration. Okay. But however, followed by Brainmark, there were so many other philosophies which came into existence regarding loading conditions. Initially, according to Brainmark, it was a two-stage implant insertion procedure, where during the first stage you install the bone into install the implant into the bone. The second stage you are going to connect the abutment to the fixture. So the time gap between the first stage and second stage is 6 months in the maxilla and 3 months in the mandible. But then later Misch came, he suggested that you can also go for a progressive or a gradual loading in case the patient is an ideal patient for implant placement and the number of implants used is less. Okay. And more recently we are also having immediate functional loading, and they have found nearly 95 to 100% success rate in patients in whom immediate functional loading is being done. But this you cannot do for all patients. You can do it provided the bone quality is very good. It's either class 1 or D1 or D2 bone. The functional forces are controlled in that patient and more preferable in the mandible when compared to your maxilla. Okay. So the basic is that you can't overload. The load has to be within the physiological limits. Any overload you give will result in stress concentration and there will be undermining bone resorption taking place instead of opposition. Yes. So selection of patient is very important in deciding the load being given to the implant. Next, so you have placed the implants. Now you have to evaluate how much amount of osseointegration has taken place. See, if it's in a study, if it's an experimental study, then there are numerous ways you can go for checking your osseointegration. You have invasive methods like you take a histological section and see. You go for histomorphometric studies. You can go for TARC gauges. You have transmission electron microscopes, or you also have a pull-out test. But all these we cannot do in live patients. So we go for non-invasive methods like you take a radiograph and see. You are not sure with the radiographs, you can go for a perio test. You can also go for a reverse TARC test. Okay, or there is something called resonance frequency analysis, which is more commonly used, okay, to check for the primary implant stability, also for the secondary implant stability. Okay, there is also dynamic model testing and impulse testing. So all these are there to check if the osseointegration has been completed and if it is best for the implants to be loaded. Next is failure of osseointegration. Yes, so it's not that we are always going to have 100% success with placement of implants. There can also be failures, and these failures you can classify them into early failures and late failures. Okay. Early is there is no establishment of contact between the bone and the implant. Late is the established contact is being disrupted. Yes. So this early and late failures can occur either because of biological factors like some infections, or it can be mechanical factors like due to overloading or fracture. Yes. So to avoid such failures, we have to take into consideration all the 6 factors which I explained to you in the previous slides. So if these 6 factors are taken care of, then these failures could be avoided. Also, after placing the implants, the maintenance of implants is very important. Cleanliness has to be maintained in the site. You can use interproximal brushes or interdental brushes. You can use interdental flosses, and then you will have to do a regular checkup with the dentist. Say at least 6 months once you have to go to the dentist and check for the health of these implants. Okay, so an in-office monitoring is very important, and in the first figure you can see that an adequate biological seal is being formed around the implants by means of the soft tissue, but whereas in the second figure you can see that there is no such biological seal being formed between the soft tissue and the implants. So what we want is a very good biological seal. So here in the diagram you can see an effective biological seal formed in the implants. Okay, and this biological seal which is going to exist around the implants is different from that of the biological seal which is present around the natural tooth, because the collagen fibers are almost parallel. Okay, they are not oriented in different directions, they are only parallel. Okay, formed mainly because of the hemidesmosomes. So this is more fragile. This biological seal around the implants is more fragile when compared to that of the tooth. So you can't give heavy forces while probing to check for this biological seal. But formation of this biological seal is very important, because it is this region where the initial tissue breakdown will start, and tissue necrosis will start, and then slowly the destruction will take place around the implants. So it is this biological seal which is going to act as a physiological barrier to prevent the ingress of bacterial plaque, toxins, debris, and other deleterious substances which are being taken into the oral cavity. So an osseointegration not just means that an osseointegration is taking place. A biological seal should also have been formed. Okay. So next, here are certain figures or diagrams which are showing you the failures of osseointegration. Okay. Uh, so what we want is we want an healthy osseointegration to take place and not such failures which are taking place around the implants. So summary is that osseointegration is a basic and primary requisite for success of dental implants. Okay, and this osseointegration to take place, we have to take into consideration all the key factors which we were discussing in the previous slide. Each and every factor is very very important. So each and every step, starting right from the diagnosis and selection of the patient, okay, to selection of implants, is very very important. A proper diagnosis, proper treatment planning, proper surgical protocols, and proper biological considerations, a proper history of the patient, all that has to be taken before placing implants. Yes, so only when the osseointegration is good, the retention and stability is going to be good, and it is going to fulfill the essential functional needs of the patient over the time. So these are my references which I've used for bringing about this PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.